Hi, I'm David Lynam, Kitsap County Fire Marshal, and I'm here today with several of our fire prevention specialists from across the county to spend some time with you talking about fire prevention, fire safety, and how what happens in our community can affect your life in each and every way. Today with me I have Jared Moravec. He's the Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal for Bainbridge Island. We have Teresa McLennan. Teresa is the Fire Information and Education Officer for Central Kitsap Fire and Rescue. And we have Greg Rogers, who's the Fire Prevention Manager at South Kitsap Fire and Rescue. So the reason that we're here today is to just talk a little bit about what the fire problem is. Almost every day we hear something on the news about another fire that has occurred in a home where somebody was injured, perhaps somebody died, but surely somebody was out of their home. And it really is a huge problem, not only in our community but nationwide. It's estimated that nationwide, each and every year, we burn up about $15 billion worth of things in direct property loss. Washington State alone last year had about $227 million worth of loss. And last year in our own county, we had about $7 million worth of direct property loss that's due to fire. A lot of this has to do with fires that occur in our public buildings. And we've had a number of those recently that have really affected not only us and the people who run the business, but for the customers that are there as well. I think one thing that's very important to remember about a fire and a commercial loss is that statistics indicate that 85% of the time, if you have a fire in your business, you'll never open the doors again. That's a terrific loss to our community. This first slide that we have here for you today is just a picture of the Kingston Inn fire. Looked like when first responders originally got there.
Yeah, one of the things that we learned is that 7 minutes from dispatch, the structure actually flashed over due to the amount of contents that was in the building itself. And that's one of the things that we have to deal with in the fire service, is not necessarily just the structure itself, it's the contents that are in the structure that really cause the problems. A lot of times with today's plastics and other materials that they use, it potentially could generate a lot of heat. And studies have found that we've started to see flashover occur a lot less than what we used to see back in the 80s and the 70s. Where we didn't have the types of products that we have in our homes today, such as computers, some of the bigger size TVs with HD TVs, and some of the materials that we're seeing in actual furnitures themselves.
Yeah, and my understanding, Greg, was that the Kingston Inn didn't have any type of fire sprinklers at all in there, and some of the people throughout the day had recognized that there was a problem perhaps with the occupancy there.
Correct.
So despite their best efforts in having early detection, somebody there to tell them about the fire, it was still very disastrous for the community. You mentioned flashover. Just what happens inside a place at flashover?
Usually in an occupancy, what will happen is you'll start to have a small fire, and as the temperature rises, there's the need for that fire to create oxygen. And literally what happens as the fire continues to burn, when we reach flashover, that's when everything in the room reaches a combustible stage, so everything basically just turns into fire at that time.
Oh, so everything that's in there bursts into flames.
Right, correct.
Yeah. Well, not only in Kingston, but throughout the country, a lot of our tremendous life-loss fires have occurred in public occupancies, particularly in assemblies. Remember just a couple of years ago you had the Station nightclub fire. And we kind of mirror that in our own community. In 2006, for instance, the Mitzel's restaurant in Paulsbo burned up, and that too was a building that was not provided with automatic fire sprinklers. I think you were involved with that, weren't you, Jared?
Yes, that's true, Dave. Probably the one thing that we had going for us at that particular fire was the building was unoccupied, so we didn't have that same risk to life as we would as happened at the Kingston Inn, for example. So, and you're absolutely right. In this particular fire, the building was not equipped with a fire sprinkler system, and because of that, and because of a delay in reporting, it was actually reported by a passerby, the fire had the opportunity to grow to a point that was really unmanageable by the time that fire crews were made aware and were able to respond.
So regardless of the resources that they could bring to bear on that incident, it still was a loss.
That is correct. So with the new building that's been built there in its place, that building is equipped with a fire sprinkler system and a fire alarm system. So we should be able to avoid any type of similar instances in that building.
Well, it's not just that type of occupancy where we have the assemblies. I know that our community has had some tremendous losses in multifamily. Multifamily, that's, apartment buildings and things like that. I'm sure many of us here today still remember the Kona Village fire. The fire department had some, they had some challenges in being able to address that loss. Greg, weren't you mentioning something about the codes and the sprinklers? This was another building, again, that didn't have any sprinklers in it.
Right. At the time this building was built, it didn't require sprinklers, and this was one of the major efforts that the fire service and the county fire marshal's office did throughout the county in looking at new construction, where we went through and we started to require multifamily occupancies to have sprinklers installed under certain conditions. And then we also went in to go as far as looking at possibly retroactively providing some requirements for apartment complexes. This is where the fire service and the stakeholders came together and developed a game plan, or a plan to address those existing occupancies that didn't have fire sprinklers or fire alarm systems. And we went through and evaluated all the multifamily units throughout the entire county and looked at and assessed an evaluation to those occupancies to determine if we should install a fire alarm system or if we should install a fire alarm system and a sprinkler system based upon that evaluation of what we thought their risk of hazard was. And we've had several apartment complexes around the county. Many apartment complexes, actually I would say all apartment complexes around the county have installed some type of fire alarm system so they can notify occupants throughout the building, and we've had several apartment complexes throughout the county install sprinkler systems.
Now you've been very involved in code development nationwide, I know, and some of the challenges specifically with Kona Village that they had then we still struggle with today.
Correct. I think one of the biggest couple of challenges that we had was lack of water, which we experience, in our rural areas in the county. I think it's a little misleading in urban areas, such in the city of Bremerton. You would think that they would have enough water, but it's issues that we deal with all across the county and all across the state. And one of the other things that we deal with is the lack of access. One of the things that we found out from Kona Village is that there were folks actually trying to get their cars out as we were trying to get in and position apparatus around to be able to combat that fire, and it made our operation-wise very difficult for us to operate and proceed in those areas. And I think one of the other things that really limited the fire service in that avenue was the staffing. We're very limited county-wide in regards to staffing. We really count on multiple agencies responding together when we have a large fire like this and other large fires that we've experienced. We really count on everybody countywide.
Yeah, and that's why prevention is so very important, just because we don't have those unlimited resources, and a couple of big incidents at once could leave us in a real hurt.
And Dave, could I add something on that? In the Kona Village 97 fire, there were 4 fire deaths. And when we talk about retroing the buildings and ensuring that there are sprinklers installed in the new multi-family residences, our goal really is not to increase the rent for folks or increase the cost to the owners of the property, but our goal is to prevent any other future fire deaths in multi-family dwellings. So.
Exactly.
And also on the prevention, when Greg talks about access, oftentimes in the fire service we get calls about people blocking the fire lane and parking in the fire lanes, and this in the Kona Village is a prime example of why it is so important that folks not park in the fire lane.
Sure.
just as a reminder.
Yeah, even if just for a minute, that could have
Just
been
for
the
a
minute you needed.
That's right.
Well, these do affect, the private businesses and occupancies. There are public buildings that we have too, but devastating loss to a community is like in 1993 with the Crown Hill Elementary School fire. And we help protect through prevention other government buildings and the infrastructure of our communities. And as hard as it is to get money to operate the schools, it's even harder to come about trying to replace something like that. So the prevention efforts that we do will help you in the places where you live. They're going to help you where you do your business, because we want to make for sure that those are still up and operating, and in our educational communities too. And I know that several of you have been involved in some of the programs directly at the school. Touch a Truck, I think you were advertising, Teresa?
Well, throughout the year, and especially during Fire Prevention Month, we do countywide have a lot of events that attract folks into the fire stations, whether it's in South Kitsap, Bainbridge, or Central Paulsbo, to draw folks in so that it provides us an opportunity to visit with them about fire prevention tips and escape planning, the value of sprinklers, answer questions about if a sprinkler head goes off, will my entire house flood? So it really, when we offer the Touch a Truck programs or have people in for open houses, it's really an opportunity for everyone in the fire service to answer questions and be sure our community is prepared in the event of a fire.
Mm-hmm. And it's very important to get people thinking about it early on. Most recently, I'm sure that everybody in our county is touched in some way by the tremendous loss with the Arnold's Furniture Store fire. And sometimes, despite our best efforts or whatever we try to do with prevention, folks, you still have fires. But that's just such a classic example, kind of a tale of two buildings, if you will, the sprinkled side and the unsprinkled side. If you drive by there today, the sprinkled side is still standing there. The unsprinkled side is gone. It burned away during the fire, and now all the remnants of that have really been moved away. But a couple of the things that are there is not only is it the sprinklers that are providing that direct property protection, but also the whole package involved with that, with the fire alarm system and the sprinkler system and the fire resistive construction there. One of the photos that we have to share for you today is actually looking at the Arnold's Furniture Store fire through the fire doors that worked. The sprinkler protection worked in the sprinkled side. The fire protection system, the doors weren't propped open, they were shut. And in that photograph there, it's very vivid that you can see that those doors, even though they're burned up to a great extent on the inside, looking through that picture, through those same doors, into that burned up side, for me was just very dynamic. And Greg, I know you were there to see some of that damage.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that really caught my eye when I had an opportunity to look at it after the fire was over, and one of them's in the picture. When you're looking at the doors from the sprinklered side, and you're actually looking from the building over in the left-hand part of the picture, you can see the knobs to a dresser, and to me that dresser was amazing, to be that close to the fire doors and literally be that close to that much heat and fire. And looking at that dresser, it really impressed me, because it virtually looked like you could take that dresser out, take it home and put it in your kid's room or in your own room, and you would never even know that it's been even remotely close to a fire. One of the other things that impressed me with that fire was the warehouse that was in the back that was sprinklered. They had mattresses stored up in the warehouse, and literally the wall on the warehouse side was completely gone and exposed to the fire. But when the sprinklers activated, the mattresses still had the plastic wrap on them even after the fire was over. And it really amazed me that the sprinklers could potentially, literally keep that plastic from even melting. From a distance, it looked like you could just basically pick one of those mattresses up, take it home, and put it in. And I think the other thing that caught my eye was the amount of water that we had to use to extinguish that fire, you know, a lot of that water got into the sprinklered side of the building, but it was amazing to me how the water damage was just at the carpet. It literally looked like you could go in that store and pick up a piece of furniture that day and take it home with you. It really caught me off guard, the difference in the comparison of the, you know, the two different buildings. It really was a true example of what you could do with a fire protection system.
And I'd like to add, you know, when we're talking about sprinklers, and I know some folks are listening saying, well, I don't have a sprinkler in my home, and this is really not about me. I don't have fire doors in my home. And I just want to remind folks that in essence you do, and that some things that you can do in your own home, even without a sprinkler system, is to ensure that, for example, when you leave your home in the day or you go to bed at night, that you shut the doors. And it can act as a fire door, even your bedroom door, keeping smoke and heat out of the room for very valuable seconds or minutes that could lead to a fire, to escaping from the fire. So in our homes, we do have protections that we can use. This is just not strictly a public or occupancy building where these safeguards are
Totally installed. And you know, there are occupants, we do have homes across the county that have fire sprinklers in them. And our apartment buildings do. And this next slide that we have here brings that home. You'll see a picture there, and in this slide it's got a fire that's right beside a recliner chair.
Right.
And this fire started, somebody fell asleep while they were smoking, and they actually ignited a newspaper that they'd been reading and some books and other materials right there beside that recliner. And they were awakened to the fire. It wasn't the smoke alarms that got it, it was actually the sprinkler head that was right over that chair.
Right.
It was the water falling on this person that woke them up. Really saved their life. It was a situation that was saved entirely that way. So if you do have that, you've got the installed fire protection in the doors in your homes, but if you've got the sprinkler system, the sprinkler systems really don't just save property, they save lives, and we see instances of that all the time.
absolutely.
If we could just, well, in specific instance, Jared, you have a recent sprinkler save in a single-family residence. Tell us about it.
Actually, multifamily residence on the 4th floor of a senior housing complex where a light had overturned and come into contact with the mattress of the occupant, with the occupant in the bed. And a sprinkler had activated.
Wow.
and held that fire in check and prevented him from, and really the other occupants of the building from any injuries. And I think that it's really, really important to stress, you know, these successes that, you know, there's reasons why these types of systems are required by the code to go in buildings. And you know, granted, it's not a sensational story that might make the front page of the paper, but certainly for those of us that are in the business, these are the sensational stories. Is when we have successes and when we can actually show that you know, this system did make a difference and it did save a life or did save property.
And we know that nationwide, you know, that's not always the case. Nationally, even though it's been going down year after year, we still lose about 3,000 lives to sprinklers. Fatality fires, where people die in fires, not lose them to sprinklers, but we lose them in fires. And there's many, many thousands more that have horrific injuries from these type of fire instances that occur over there. What's kind of interesting to note is that homes, the place where you should be the safest, where where you think you're the most protected. 83% of the people who die in fires nationwide die in their homes. In our state, it's about 73%. But in Kitsap County, it's 100% of the time. If you have a fire fatality, it's occurred in your house. It's occurred in the place where you should be the most safe. And it's a very devastating effect to have a fire in a home. And I think some of the misconceptions that are out there about people, we watch fires on television, and you know, the fire departments do their best, but people think you have all the time in the world to do something about that fire.
Right, and you know, I think the next slide kind of drives home part of that point, and we've been talking a lot about sprinklers, and I know we will be talking about smoke alarms in your home, but the whole situation is a little bit more complex in terms of there are certain things that we can build into the home or the structure that can have an impact on fire protection and your safety. But there's other things too that a lot of folks take for granted, such as access, such as water supply. And in this particular slide, which was a fire that we experienced on Bainbridge Island in 2007, it was a scenario where again, thankfully, no one was home at the time and no one was injured, but the firefighting operation was quite difficult because of narrow roadways, because of a very long approach that we had to take to lay hose lines, which delays our ability to make a quick attack to attempt to get the fire under control. That combined with a lack of hydrants in the area, whereby then we need to shuttle water in tanker trucks to get the water there as a substitute for hydrants, and that takes additional manpower. So again, it's very important to realize that fire protection doesn't begin and end with the systems that are built into your residence or into a building, but it's all of the infrastructure that surrounds it as well.
You know, I was talking just a little bit earlier with Michelle Laboda. She's a fire public educator up in North Kitsap Fire and Rescue, and she was relaying a conversation that she had with a student at a school, and they asked, you know, whose job is it for fire prevention? And all the kids would point back at the firefighters and say, it's your job. And her response is no, it's your job. It's the people who live there. And we see this all the time. This next slide shows a fire in a mobile home. There's really an awful lot that you can do for yourself to help protect your home. We can only do so much with building codes and construction, and the fire department can only do so much. But Teresa, it really depends an awful lot on the things that you have in your home and how you handle that too.
Absolutely, and so when we meet with the community and in sessions like this, we really want to remind people there are so many causes for home fires. And in the photo that you see now, this is a fire in central Kitsap, a mobile home, and this was caused by a wood stove. And it was, the wood stove was overfilled, and then the doors not shut properly, combustibles too close to the wood stove. And we see this time and time again, whether it's people emptying out wood stove and putting the ashes in a paper bag, or setting the ashes on the deck, and something combustible catching fire. So, but one of the things we want to remind people is that regardless of how a fire starts in your home, and they start for so many reasons, some of them are preventable and some of them are they just happen. It is so important that folks have practiced a fire escape plan. They have working smoke alarms, that the alarms are tested regularly, and that everyone knows the one meeting spot where they're going to get out and meet everyone in their home. So those are the messages we really want to stress over and over and over again. You don't necessarily have time to think when you wake up in the middle of the night. It's dark, it's smoky, there are strange noises going on. You have matters of seconds or minutes to get out of your home, and we count, the fire department, fire service counts on people to do their part in getting out of the home before we get there.
Critically important. You have to take care of yourself. You have to have that plan to save
Absolutely.
yourself to get out alive. One other thing that we might touch
Dave,
upon.
I think one of the other things when Teresa talks about escape plans, one of the things that I heard about recently was a lot of burn injuries occur because people are going back in to the homes, and I think that goes back to emphasize what Teresa's talking about. When you practice that escape plan, and once you get out of the house and you start getting oriented, you don't go, oh my gosh, I need to go back in and get my dogs, I need to go back in and get, you know, your whole livelihood is in your house, and we do realize that. But I think the most important thing is that you have your own personal safety and that you're okay. One of the ladies that talked to me recently at the Harborview Burn Center she said a majority of her fires, or a majority of her burn victims, are victims that actually go back into the home to try to retrieve something or try to get a house. And I think it's important with what Teresa said, that once you're out, you really stay out.
Stay out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very important.
Right.
One other point I'd like to make too about house fires that we have. Today's economy, there's an awful lot of vacant properties that are out there, and one of the principal causes of fires really has to do with the juvenile fire setting. This next slide shows a fire that happened in a home that was vacant, attributable to some kids that were in there. They'd turned this place into a clubhouse, and it's more of that, what you can do again to save yourself from having a fire, even if it's a vacant place that you aren't interested anymore, is to make for sure that it's policed and closed up so that it doesn't become an attractive nuisance and it doesn't give the opportunity for those type of things to happen. And even though it might be a vacant house that maybe you don't even have a lot of interest in, we've talked time and time again about how our resources are strapped. And if the firefighters are out at this type of a fire, their chances of being able to respond to you, they could be stressed to get to you when you really need them as well.
Right.
Another thing that we've made great strides in, a lot of our fires are actually caused by improperly discarded smoking materials. And I know all of us here have worked very hard over the last couple of years, and Washington State has joined a majority of the states across the union actually in adopting fire-safe cigarettes. It means they're self-extinguishing. If you don't actively smoke them, they're going to go out. And the smoking fires they're no less devastating than a cause by anything else, but oftentimes they'll happen in the middle of the night, or like a couple of slides ago, we saw the person that lit their chair on fire because they fall asleep with the smoking that's on there. But Teresa had brought up something a little bit earlier about how important it is to have those mechanisms in your house and have them continuing to working. The smoke alarms, the escape planning, and the plans that actually save the lives and property that are in there. So if there's one thing that we could really emphasize at home to everybody when they go home tonight, or if they're watching this from home, what would you like to tell them?
Well, I'd like to be sure that everyone in our community is aware that if they do not have working smoke alarms in their home and are not able to get working smoke alarms for themselves, to please call your local fire department. Every fire department in our county has the ability to come out and help you get working smoke alarms installed in your home. We don't just give out smoke alarms. We know that oftentimes folks aren't sure where to place a smoke alarm. They're not sure basically proper placement, and so oftentimes the smoke alarms sit on a shelf. That's not what we want to have happen. So if you give us a call, we will come out and install the smoke alarms for you if you are unable to get your own smoke alarms. Also, the other thing is that it's essential that you have working smoke alarms on every level of your home. One smoke alarm in your home is generally not enough. And in all new construction, there are smoke alarms in every room in which people sleep, and that is something that we emphasize. People work very hard to be sure that they have smoke alarms in every room where someone sleeps. If someone's always sleeping in the family room, then that family room needs a smoke alarm, not just the bedrooms. And then the other thing is that if you have any questions about fire escape planning, how to get your child or someone out of a second story or something that and you're not sure, give your local fire department a call. We would be very happy to come out and work with you on that, or have us out to speak to your group about fire safety.
Plenty of resources available. Is that something that you have all year long rather than just this month?
Absolutely, 365 days a year.
Well, Thanks for spending time with us here today. We really appreciate your effort. We know that we've just got a few minutes that we've spent with you, but I think everyone in this room will agree that if somehow we've prevented a fire, if we've helped you think about fire safety for your own home, then it's been worth this and any amount of time that we could spend with you. And most importantly, if we can reiterate, if you have any questions at all about this topic, anything else related to fire safety, don't hesitate to call your local fire department. They're the professionals that are there to help you through this or anything else that you might have. And thanks for your time.
Fires in the home pose one of the greatest threats to the people of your community. Nearly 400,000 home fires occur every year in this country, and in one recent year, nearly 3,000 people died in fires that started right at home. You are 80% less likely to die in a house fire if sprinklers are present. Home sprinkler systems respond quickly to reduce the heat, flames, and smoke from a fire, giving families valuable time to get to safety. Roughly 90% of the time, fires are contained by the operation of just one sprinkler. When sprinklers are present in a house fire, they save lives.
One of the facts that I could state is that there has been no fatality in a residential sprinklered home that has been intimate with the fire.
Sprinkler protection has been shown to be over 95% effective over its lifetime, that lifetime being over 30 years. Sprinkler protection has a reputation for never having had a multiple fatality fire where sprinklers have been maintained and adequately installed.
The Bremerton Fire Department, the Kitsap Fire Chiefs Association, the Kitsap Fire Marshal's Office, and the Bremerton Housing Authority teamed up to demonstrate the effectiveness of home sprinkler systems in a controlled fire exercise.
The purpose of what we're trying to do today is to show you the difference between fires in residences in sprinkled versus non.
2 of the 4 units featured exterior walls that were modified for this demonstration. This modification provided observers with a rare opportunity to see how both sprinklered and non-sprinklered homes would fare in a fire.
What we should expect to see in the house with sprinklers is we should see a small fire created within about 2 to 3 minutes. Prior to that, the smoke detector should go off. Immediately following the smoke detector, the sprinkler head should activate and hopefully keep the fire in check. The goal of the sprinkler system is not to suppress the fire, it's to control the fire so that way people can evacuate the building. The house without sprinklers will see the same thing. We'll see a small fire created and started in a wicker wastebasket. Once that fire is started, the smoke detector should go off within 2 to 3 minutes. Once that occurs, up somewhere in between the range of 6 to 8 minutes, we should have flashover in the room, and then the firefighters are going to come in and suppress the fire.
Officials first ignited a fire in the unit without sprinklers. They allowed the flame to build intensity before firefighters moved in to squelch it. Next, an identical blaze was lit in an adjacent unit that was outfitted with a residential sprinkler system. After the fires were completely extinguished, officials conducted walkthroughs of the units to illustrate the differences between the two situations. This live fire demonstration was designated to provide a very graphic display of how quickly fire sprinklers work to subdue heat, flames, and smoke. Fire sprinklers save lives. They protect the lives of firefighters who respond to these fires as well. Home fire sprinklers are a proven way to protect lives and property against fires in the home.